All right, sounds good.
Okay. So thank you all for sticking around. I hope this was a great first night for Momentum. I know we've had a lot of great questions and met a lot of great folks. I'm going to kick this over to Dorene, who is professor at Point Park. I'll let you introduce yourself and my friends. And I've been hyping up this panel. I'm really excited for it. Let's go.
All right, sounds great, RJ. Thank you. And I think we have all three of our panelists with us. So panelists, you're welcome to turn your cameras on and unmute, and we will get ready to begin. So I'd like to welcome you all to our panel discussion focused on story and content marketing as part of the AMA Pittsburgh's Momentum program. And as you know, this Momentum series is sponsored by Community College of Allegheny County. The American Marketing Association Pittsburgh chapter is the essential community for marketers in the region. No other organization provides more ways for marketers and academics to connect with the people and resources they need to be successful. So we're excited to have you all connected to this AMA Pittsburgh Momentum program. We have an absolutely amazing panel scheduled for tonight, focused on story and content marketing. So I'm excited to get our panel started and introduce our panelists. So as technology and practice continue to evolve, so do the disciplines and industries behind them. The future creative professional is both a marketer and a designer and can flex between these two overlapping skill sets. That's why you're all here with this Momentum program. This story and content marketing session is part of the Momentum program from the AMA Pittsburgh, and it's designed to quickly give designers and marketers some relevant and practical skills in a meaningful and memorable cohort experience. I'm Dorene Ciletti. As RJ mentioned, I am an associate professor of marketing and the program director of the marketing and sales program at Point Park University in Pittsburgh. And I'm also the co-director of our Women in Industry program and our honors college. I'm excited to be with you today, and I will be learning right along with you because we have the content marketing experts with us tonight. Content marketing, according to the Content Marketing Institute, is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. So that's a bit of a mouthful. They summarize it by suggesting that it's about engaging audiences. It's about the future, preparing those audiences and customers to solve their problems, meet their challenges, and reach their goals. So to help us better understand content marketing and the role it plays in digital strategy, we're going to talk today to Katy Spencer-Johnson, Callie Goodwin, and Chris Barrows. So let me first introduce Katy. Katy Spencer-Johnson is a content strategist, educator, and consultant, and she's an advisory board member for the National Institute for Social Media. She really knows her stuff. She serves as the director of marketing and communications for a disability services provider outside of Boston. As an established digital marketing and communications professional, she has a background in social media management, community development, media relations, crisis communication, nonprofit development, publishing, and social media content for both the B2B and B2C sides. She's also worked in higher education, nonprofit, and publishing industries. She adeptly develops creative, engaging, and actionable content across various platforms, including print and digital collateral. From strategic discussion to content creation, she can facilitate every aspect of a marketing campaign. She tailors content with context, delivering client messaging to critical audiences, developing newsletters, donor letters, event contacts, landing pages, blog content, press releases that ensure donor support, customer engagement, and actionable results. You can find her on Twitter, and she welcomes connections at Katy, Katyb _Spencer, Spencer, and also on LinkedIn. So you can see why we have Katy on our panel tonight. I'd also like to welcome Callie Goodwin. She is a dynamic entrepreneur, educator, and social media strategist with an amazing entrepreneurial background. She has made a name for herself in both the small business and education worlds. She's the founder of Sparks of Joy Co., a thriving small business that offers pre-stamped greeting cards for all occasions. Callie's innovative use of social media enabled her to launch her business on TikTok, where she has gained almost 100,000 followers and sold over 30,000 cards. In addition to her entrepreneurial pursuits, Callie is well known in the higher education community. She is actually the marketing and communications manager at ZMe, which is a social app that is redefining the way students and colleges connect and build community. She's also an educator who teaches courses in social media and web design at Columbia International University. Her passion for education extends beyond the classroom as she hosts the brand new podcast, Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager. You can connect with her on Twitter as well, at Callie Goodwin, CALLIEGOODWIN. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. You can also find her on TikTok at Sparks of Joy Co. And finally, rounding out our panel, we have another expert with us, Chris Barrows. He is a digital marketing professional with 15 years of experience as a digital marketing strategist, community builder, social media strategist, and he has experience across a diverse set of industries, including higher ed, not-for-profit, and food and beverage. He has served in a training capacity for nearly 2 decades and has a master's degree in instructional technology from the Discovery Education Program. Currently, Chris is serving as corporate communications specialist for Wakefern Food Corporation, and he previously drove digital strategies for New York University and Wilkes University, respectively. He also served as marketing manager at Cohn Resnick's manager from 2019 through 2022, where he worked with more than 12 industries driving both B2B and B2C marketing efforts. So what a panel. I'm so excited to welcome you all here. I'm going to stop sharing the slides so that we can get into our discussion with these amazing panelists. So what I'd love to start with, in the introduction, I shared with everyone the Content Marketing Institute's definition of content marketing. But I'd love to hear your perspective on how you define content marketing, being that you work in the field. So Katy, let's start with you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, thank you for having me. So I think content marketing is often really synonymous in industry with long form content, right? So we think about blogs, white papers, LinkedIn articles, but it can also be Twitter threads, infographics, website content, video, podcast show notes, social media campaigns. It's so nuanced, right? Especially as we have more and more platforms on which to share content out of. But really for me, content marketing is the holistic whole that delivers the content with context, the value to your audience. So getting back to the original definition, but also content that aligns to your organizational goals, right? So content that is providing value, but is still meeting your organization's, plan, strategy, goals. Otherwise, your content is really just noise. So yeah, that's how I define it.
And Callie, what would you add to that from your perspective?
So for me, I think for content marketing, it's a lot of the visuals, a lot of the photos and videos, social posts that we put out there in the world. But the goal is that we are creating content that is both informational, entertaining, and helps build trust between our audience and us. Instead of just sales pitch all the time, this is the other types of content that we put out in the world to create that positive relationship so that people are more likely to be our customers and want to listen to us and follow us and ultimately support our brand, other than just like the standard sales pitch.
And Katy mentioned building trust is key. And that's something, Callie, that you mentioned as well. Chris, are there other things we should be thinking about as we look at a definition of content marketing?
Yeah, I think for me, I would echo what both everyone has said so far, really. But I'd add, for me, very much the one piece that's critically important is purpose. It's purposeful. there's a real strategy behind it. It's not like just throwing it up against the wall and hoping it sticks. It is meant to drive value. And for me, that's the big difference between content marketing and just content. A lot of people create great content, but when you put it all together and it delivers on a long-term value for someone, that ultimately is the content marketing. And that's why I think this is a profession. I mean, ultimately, a lot of people can create content. You see it, you see the virality of content sometimes, but there's many people who you don't see again. And that's why even when you talk about things that stick, something can go viral, but that organization can continue to be seen and seen and seen. And that's because quality of content is coming from planning and driving value. And that's not always a big brand, by the way. And I think that's the biggest thing I stress. You don't have to be well known, but if you're well known in the industry where you're trying to drive value, you're doing your job. And so it's not just about, you know, the big names at the table, but if you're hitting your audience, you're doing your job, and that's the key.
Well, that's really interesting that you brought up, well, we talked about trust, and now you've really put a focus on the idea of value. And, you know, I think that's sometimes what is difficult for someone to understand when they move from maybe doing their own personal social media to wanting to do something for an organization, you know, that how do you make that leap? So I'm interested in knowing a little more about your general approach to content marketing. And I'm thinking we're going to talk more about trust and value as we move through this. But I think for our audience, it would be great to learn more about how you approach this.
I can kick that off. So I am super relational and grounded in my organization's strategy and goals. I'm a strategist at heart. I started with content and quickly morphed into strategy. I really do start with asking, how do we define success for this piece of content? What is our end goal? How does this fit into the larger whole of a marketing campaign, marketing strategies and tactics? How robust is our strategy in this space? Do we know who we're trying to speak to? And then that flows into a little bit more of a technical understanding. So SEO understanding, optimized keywords, data around the topic. I think all too often folks kind of jump into tactics because it's really easy to articulate, right? It's really easy to visualize that. So, and non-marketers especially jump straight to the end result. I want an infographic, I want a white paper, I want a landing page. I really, really like to ask why, which makes me not the most favorite person in the room sometimes as a marketer. I want to know the reason behind our content. I want to understand, how is this going to resonate? I want to understand scope, scale, budget, resources, and expectations. This provides a framework and a context for my content. It also helps me support a marketing pipeline and really set expectations for success. Without these conversations, I find that sometimes content completely falls apart, and we're not on the same page even within our own team, and then therefore the content doesn't perform as well.
No,
It's interesting that you say it too, because Katy and I've known Katy a long time, and we come from a similar background and kind of, I think, our viewpoint on this. But I can go back as far as when I was at NYU, and I remember that core question you talked about, Katy, was the question I asked everyone when they wanted to make a new account. Yeah. What is your purpose? And it stopped probably 75% of new accounts from being made because we didn't need any more accounts at the time. It was wild, wild west for sure. Yeah. But the other thing for me, and this has been consistent, and I think it's grown, which is community factor and understanding your audience through community efforts. So if you look now, and I'm very active, I think RJ was making reference to it in the chat about in the board game community specifically, but you see this across the board, whether it be Slack channels or Discords, where you have a chance to make these really close connections with people and understand your audience. And so I see a lot of community style content these days, and that's the critical piece that I've been trying to play to. How do we get to know our community? Are we asking them questions? Are we trying to survey them and find out more about what they care about? And it is going back to that data. And that's why, going back to what Katy said, up at the start, we asked the question of, what are we trying to accomplish? The other question I always ask, by the way, is also what data do we have around this already, or what have we tried before? Especially if I'm coming into an organization or I'm doing consulting, I want to know what we've done before and what data we have, because I need to know what hasn't worked. And the biggest thing is it's okay to fail, but let's fail up and let's figure out how to fix the problems of previous failures and use that to our advantage in the next go around when making that content.
Yeah, failing forward and using them as using our failures as an opportunity to learn and grow rather than trying to hide them or thinking it's something to be ashamed of. We're all going to fail, so let's do it, but let's learn from it. Let's move forward. That's such amazing advice, Chris. And something, that you and Katy both talked about was asking the why and really understanding purpose. And that seems to be a shortcoming in a lot of organizations when they think about content marketing. Callie, to pull you into this discussion, you've been incredibly successful with TikTok. I'm guessing you had a strategy, you had a why and a purpose when you set that up?
So when I started my business, I started my TikTok account. They both started the same day. And the goal was, so my business, I sell pre-stamped greeting cards in a very digital world. So it's hard to sell something like that, especially like going back to something that is written, but I wanted to utilize our digital platforms. And so through that, really was just telling the story of who I was, why I was doing it, and the impact that it could have. So instead of just, I will say the first couple videos I did were very much like salesy pitches, and realized that was not doing well. And that was not meant for TikTok. So I shifted my strategy and began to include more of my personal life in that, include my business. What is me it's part of who I am. And so began to include more personal stuff in there and include the stories behind why I'm sending these cards or why it's important, like what makes us unique. And through that storytelling, through the storytelling of my life and my business, we also have some mental health content in there. I've built this following of people that are not only following me to purchase my cards, but are following me to support me in my life, and they're invested in not just the business, but in me. And so there's something special about when you can build your own brand that gets personal, and you can kind of break down some of those corporate guardrails and make it more relatable. People love to support people. And I think that's a big difference between the big box stores and small businesses, is that people know that their purchases are going to help somebody and not just going into corporate pockets. And so being able to leverage that part of my story and that uniqueness to my business has been key for me.
So you mentioned story, and that's something that we're really interested in as we think about content creation for a content marketing strategy. And it sounds like, Callie, then your story, you didn't have really much separation between you and the business. You are the business. You became kind of the face of the business. Deanna asked an interesting question. With social media and closing in on personal life and time, how do you manage a healthy work-life balance? Is there even such a thing when you're doing something like content creation where you are the brand, you are the story?
I'm pretty much the worst person to ask that, because I have 4 different jobs that all relate to social media. So even when I'm not doing my day job or my small business, I'm still teaching social media, or like advocating for social media. Like that's a really terrible question for me to answer. I'll defer that to somebody else. But
to defend Callie a little bit, because I think she's being harsh on herself. I think it's really important to, speaking about mental health, knowing when you're at your limit in terms of consumption of content, being surrounded by platforms where there's potentially toxic messaging, being exposed to messaging on your own brand accounts that might be toxic. Not that everything is, but knowing that for yourself and having either support in your job, support in your team, or support in your community to then help you pull back. We don't oftentimes have that. I'm a team of 1, for example, in my current role. And so I don't have that internally at work, but I'm able to rely on folks like Chris and Callie and others to really say, okay, I'm going to take a break, or I need to talk through this process, talk through social media. And I think Callie has done a really wonderful job of sharing kind of some of the mental health challenges around being a marketer and a social media manager and being honest about that. And I think because of that, more folks are coming into the industry knowing, okay, I need to have this in place for myself to have a healthier relationship with my work.
And I do think you do end up looking at content all the time through a lens of marketer, whether you want to or not. That's just kind of part of it. I've been lucky enough to do this now for 15 years, a lot of different places. This is one of the first times social's not like my primary focus, quite frankly, in that 15 years. And I can tell you, despite that, I still make myself do it in other ways. So even though I may not be the brand per se, I also found myself at a place that wants people to tell their stories. And I think any organization that really wants to sell their brand in a positive way is going to care about that stuff. And they will give their people the opportunity to do that. And LinkedIn is a great opportunity for that. In particular, I can just say, if you see an organization where there's a lot of C-suite people posting, someone probably trained them. That is the reality of that scenario. And I'm not saying they're being ghostwritten for, but someone had to train them very often. And that is a role that someone like myself or Katy or Callie has done before, I know. And I think that's important. I do think, though, there are times when you are just going to be unable to avoid, being connected to it, because that's just what it is. And that might honestly be a side project or a passion project. I think all three of us have passion projects that mean something to us, and our community requires us to be front facing with those roles, but it's meaningful in the end because there's community there. For me, it's a Discord community that took me through an unemployment period. And honestly, my mental health was that Discord community. So social can bring a lot of good things for your mental health. And because I know everyone talks about, like you said, Katy, the negatives, but community is what I always go back to for that reason. And that's why you'll hear me talk about it just as much as storytelling when I talk about content.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. That, there are positives and negatives in everything we do, and trying to, if it's something that you have a passion for, if it's something that, that you can't always separate. So why not kind of lean in and try to find those places where you get that support, you get that connection. Well, I want to go back to the idea of story for a moment, because story is so critical to content marketing. And as we're talking to a group of designers who are expanding their knowledge on digital marketing, it's creating content is more than just having the right image and a little bit of copy. It's often about telling a story. So what are some tips on how we can more effectively tell stories and focus on the story in our content creation?
So I guess I'm happy to start on that one. For me, one of the things that I bring up is it comes down to first kind of taking a moment to tell true, authentic stories. Who are the people who are doing the things in your organization that are meaningful? And let's find ways to tell their stories. It could be a podcast. It could be a video. There's a lot of great tools out there to easily bring people in. If you're a remote company, tell their stories. And don't just do it because, and this is the critically important thing for me, don't just do it because it's International Women's Month or it's Pride Month. Tell those stories the entire year. Don't make it because of a check item. That's where so many organizations go wrong. Find the stories year round that kind of just make people inspired to care about your organization, and give those people a chance just to be themselves. And now not everyone's going to feel comfortable, but those stories are the best because they're real, they're authentic, they're genuine. And for me, those are the ones that kind of resonate. If you think about it, even during the Super Bowl, and I can't remember the commercial specifically off the top of my head, but there's multiple, I know, commercials where they tried to bring in a personal story. I could tell you that I knew the ones that resonated to me because they felt real. I even go back to when it was the Budweiser horses. Like, you actually cared about the horses in those commercials for some reason. And I could never put put words to it, to what just made that work, but it did. So when you kind of connect that storytelling with a real feeling, it goes a long way. So talk to people in the organization and learn about them, and give them a chance to tell them their story. And it needs, again, it has to be something where, they have this interest, and let them be themselves. Don't give them a script. Throw the script out on that one.
So Chris, this is something that you can't fake, at least not long-term, right?
No, you can't fake it. People know. And especially this generation, that when you talk about this generation now, they smell BS and they will call it out immediately. So if you want to try that, I mean, good luck to you, but I would never recommend it. It's an awful strategy.
I agree.
Authentic is one of my favorite words when talking about social content and content marketing. Just, you want everything to be authentic to your brand and to your audience and who you are. If you're not being authentic and you're trying to create this false narrative, like people, like Chris said, will see right through it. I know we've been talking a lot in our higher ed community about changing some of our content when it comes to admissions material to be not the pretty perfect campus that like everything's going to be perfect as soon as you step onto campus, like everything's picture perfect, but showing what life is truly like, because the reality is students get to campus and it's not this perfect package that you've sold them. They're going to transfer somewhere else because you've lied to them off the very beginning. So I take that approach with every brand that I work with, is what is authentic to us? What are our true stories that we can tell? And then what platform, which medium is the best way to tell that story? So sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it is a blurb on Instagram or Facebook, sometimes it's a Twitter thread. Like there's so many different ways to tell the story and so many different mediums that allow for so much creativity. If you're only sticking with like the standard Facebook post or Instagram post, then you're missing out on so many opportunities.
Yeah, one of the things that marketing helps us do is set expectations. So if we're setting those expectations unrealistically, in the end, it's just going to harm us. So the message around authenticity is just so critical for content marketing and for marketing in general.
And Callie, you're talking to direct engagement. That's the other thing I would note, is directly taking the moment to have true, real conversations with people. And digital allows that now. I mean, you're seeing with everything from a chat bots, and you talk about higher ed. The memory I will always have, and I'm sure everyone's seen it, it's over the years, for some reason, we still didn't get away. And I'm so glad to hear talking about this. I still remember just like 10 or 11 years in that industry, still seeing that perfect campus shot with 3 kids like laughing and smiling. And like, there's no way it's this campus. And again, that's not real. But what is real, and the things that they cared about, I just remember in particular, the stories we would try to tell were about, all right, well, here's how you're going to get your food. Here's all the places you can eat. And they cared about that. So by understanding your audience, you told the stories and the information that mattered. That stuff did well for a reason, because they cared about that. They wanted to know where to eat on campus more than anything else, quite frankly. So, that was the kind of stuff I remember. I missed that. I missed that marketing, because it's a little bit different for me now, but that was always fun thinking about that student audience, and it was always changing. And I think that was the exciting thing about higher ed, is you're constantly learning and growing, and just what does this youth movement care about?
Chris, did you use social listening to actually really understand that, or did you know that inherently just from being a social media manager and knowing campus? Like, I always knew parking was going to be an absolute nightmare in terms of sharing out information related to anything parking. So curious how you went about identifying those topics.
It was social listening, but it was also talking to students. And when we had any intern in our office, I asked them, and I got their feedback from their classmates. Plus, we were lucky. We had a social media ambassadors group that I had started on campus, and we allowed the student club like presidents into it at one point. And I was able to get direct feedback from like club presidents. And those were like the most actively engaged kids on campus. So they told you their real feelings about what they cared about and did not care about. And it was helpful to know what they liked and hated, quite frankly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, right? So story kind of personifies your brand. It breaks down the silo between the brand and people and humans. It allows the brand to kind of be a human in a way. We are humans behind the brand. So why wouldn't we use story to kind of personify that? I always find that story amplifies others. It obviously provides voice and reinforces values. Case in point, like we used to do a student newsletter on social, and it was doing horribly because we were putting, the marketing team in front of it. Nobody cared about the marketing team. The minute we had students take over, it was gold. You need the right voice to connect with your audience, and to really kind of lend, as Callie said, be genuine in the moment and build those relationships.
Well, thinking about being genuine, and Chris, you mentioned earlier, chatbots. One of the things that I was hoping we could talk a little bit about was the use of AI in content marketing, ChatGPT, chatbots. How are some of the ways that AI is being used effectively and maybe not as effectively?
So I have a really good example for this. A friend of mine owns a small business and she's also on TikTok. And just yesterday, I saw her post a video and she's like, I'm so excited about this new way that this new video I have coming out. And so today she posted it and she had asked ChatGPT to write a commercial for her brand. And her company's called Just Be Kind Co. And she sells like t-shirt and like motivational apparel and stuff. And so she had it write this like generic or like this commercial for her business. But then she took that and she acted it out on TikTok, and it showed the stark contrast between like a robot writing it, but like a human trying to make this come to life. And it did so well, not because of the AI, but it brought in a new perspective, and it showed how I don't know, just how not personal it was, but it gave her this like launching point. So now she's got this series going. She's like, I'm asking ChatGPT what like a new sticker design to do, and it'll write it and then she'll make it in her style. But it's really interesting to see when you need a perspective flip, or you need to get perspective, or you just need it to define something that's sometimes like hard to grasp. I'm not gonna lie, I totally put content marketing in ChatGPT earlier today just to see what it said because I have like my knowledge of like what content marketing is, but I wanted to make sure like I was still on the same page as like what the rest of the world is on. And so I find it so interesting just for ideas, or just sometimes it just gives you some crazy answers. It's not perfect. It's never will be perfect, but it gives a good launching point, or it's really good for perspective.
I think you're right. And I believe, because when I popped in earlier, I think RJ was talking about the fact that he's learning it and trying to understand it. I think that's critically important, because I don't think this is replacing any of us anytime soon, but it does give you a good starting point. It can give you good ideas. You could say, write some social copy for this. I could tell you, I've tried that just to see what it did, kind of that same testing mechanism that you were talking about, Callie. And the results were, meh, but there was a few little language points like, oh, this is neat. This is interesting. So you could potentially get ideas from, but it's not going to replace you still need to develop these skills, right? And you could ask it for an outline around a certain process or those sort of things. It actually does that fairly well. If you ask like, what is a briefing guide generally include, and it's going to be able to find some of these answers, and you're going to be able to continue to work from. It is more advanced search. That's what it is. So use it to your advantage, but remember that if you were to take that and just put it point blank, like right into whatever you're doing, it won't work, because it isn't human, and the human element is still important. And that is the critical piece to me. And I know that's why there's probably debate around it now of how intelligent do we want to make this thing, right? Because how intelligent can it truly be? I don't know how far it's going to go. I just know I want to understand it. I do think there are business cases for it. I think it can give some base good ideas, but I don't think it's replacing anyone. I still am going to encourage, much like RJ said, you check this out and see what it does and test the language, see how it can be helpful to you, understand how to ask it questions, because who would have thought that, 20 years ago, social media management was going to be a job. Understanding how this chat AI works could be a job one day. And so you might be that person doing it. So be ready just in case.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I think, you know, AI can be a way to like reduce brainstorm time. It's my hope that it drives us faster. It drives creative decisions faster. I agree that I don't think it'll replace the human in the creative work that we do and the marketing and the writing that we do. Let's be real. I think there's probably going to be some brands who are like, I'm going to lean heavily on it and, you know, think about that. But ultimately what it's going to come down to is what is the ROI on chat, you know, AI generated content. You know, and I just literally just had this conversation probably 2 hours ago with someone, and they were asking, hey, do I really need to know this? And I said, well, yes. I mean, will it be leveraged in your career? Yes, no. And then how fast can your organization move? And you guys have, well, Callie and Chris and probably RJ have heard me say this before, you can only move as fast as your organization will allow. So some of our organizations haven't even implemented automation workflows. Like they haven't invested in marketing beyond like some really basic stuff. So some organizations will chase new shiny pretty because it's all over the news and they'll throw it to marketers to figure out. And then most, I think, in my opinion, will wait and see about adoption, ROI, proof of efficiency for their business, and then hopefully implement. But yeah, I agree with Callie and Chris 100% that the people are still the people still matter.
You still have people, for the record, and this does, I think it relates very much to the storytelling factor, not investing in social listening and thinking that is a part-time job. Social listening, for one, is not a part-time job. It is a full-time job that is being done on a part-time basis.
Yeah.
If you're lucky at an organization.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is something that, once again, it's just another thing. So ultimately, I don't envision every organization truly understanding and grasping this. So having a knowledge of it and being able to talk about it, that's why it's so important, because this just gives you more career value, more professional value, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, the social media manager or the content strategist is a Swiss Army knife, and they have to pretty much know everything regardless. That unfortunately has not changed. And I would just kind of acknowledge that that's the reality in the room right now. Social is still not even fully respected by all organizations, quite frankly. So, but it's a real thing. The ROI of it is real to what you're speaking to, Katy. And I think this could be a benefit to it if used properly, not as a replacement. Any organization who uses it as a replacement, good luck. It still needs so much human touch. It just wouldn't work for me.
Are there other trends or technologies that, you know, that you're seeing that you expect to have an impact on social and on content marketing in the near future? You know, kind of, what are your predictions?
I think probably obviously short form video and video in general in terms of content consumption is going to continue. I read an article the other day that was saying, is social media becoming an entertainment only platform versus an education platform? And that gave me a little bit of pause, because I was like, oh, okay, like, am I supposed to be building out you know, entertaining content as well as educational? It's like, yes, we're still able to do that. You know, I think optimizing your video for search, making it accessible and genuine, not going over the top with your marketing, your branding, as Callie said, you know, speak towards being genuine. Obviously not sleeping on YouTube as a platform. I'm sure Chris can speak to that. But yeah, I see us continuing on the way we are, but with probably a little bit more nuance in the short form video content, reels, etc.
I have to echo Katy on that. I think short form video, specifically TikTok right now, as Chris and Katy both know, that I have been really heavily involved with TikTok the last few weeks, speaking at South by Southwest with them, traveling to DC to meet the CEO and to sit in the congressional hearing and to speak at the press conference about TikTok and the impact it has on businesses, but also just the world. There's 150 million Americans on TikTok right now, which is like half the United States. And the reach that it has across so many different just areas is immense. I met so many different creators while I was there, from fashion to news to cooking to baking to like just all these different areas. And it made me realize just how vast the platform is, because some of these people I realized had like upwards of 14 million followers and I had never heard of them. And now getting to interact with their content and realize that there's so much happening through short form video that is a place where people are going not only to be entertained, but to learn, to find their news, to find what's happening in the world. I know there's been an example recently about the difference between platforms and how they're showing news content. So if you search France on Instagram, it's going to show you like pretty photos of France. But if you search France on TikTok, it's going to show you the protests that are happening. And so it's very interesting to see the stark contrast in how the platforms are showing real-time content, what they're censoring, what they're not, what they're pushing, what they're not. And I think that we really need to watch closely the what is in Congress right now, what they're trying to ban with the Restrict Act, but also look at what why are they so afraid of it? It's deeper than just security issues. And I think a lot of that's been kind of exposed this last week as people are realizing how powerful the app is. So TikTok's a big one for me.
I would agree with TikTok. I wouldn't even try to speak to this level because I've watched from afar and all the amazing things that Callie's been doing, and it's just impressive. You should definitely take the chance to talk to her about it because she's extremely knowledgeable on that. For me, I will note, I think it's the community platforms. So I go back to a Discord and what it can mean for your marketing. Outside of my regular work, my passion project is a small YouTube channel. And when I say small, yeah, we're under 1,000 subscribers, but I can tell you the Discord community and building community has led to our ability to have engagement level data at the same rate as those with 1,000 or 2,000 subscribers. And it's because we have people coming every time. We're not fighting the YouTube algorithm, though the YouTube does deliver like 20 or 25,000 impressions a month. It's not like we're not getting impressions, but it's the community that's driving it. And we now have, I think the last show we had 18, 19, 20 people starting to show up. So that's their live shows, I should note. So I think that community factor is huge, and how you use it to tell your stories. Not to mention with YouTube, just per what Katie mentioned earlier, even YouTube has short style videos now, and YouTube wants you to use them. So if you're not investing in this short form vertical video, you're missing out, because every platform has it in some way or form now, and it can be used across them. Now, I'm not the biggest fan, and Callie, you probably aren't either, of when someone takes a TikTok and puts it on Reels, and then I'm trying to figure out which filter they just used. Because my latest is the young filter doesn't do anything to me, and it was driving me up a wall. But at first I didn't know what platform it was actually coming from because I saw it on Snapchat, right? But I don't like that. So don't do that cross platform thing. But the fact is everyone is doing it. So design it and use it across these different ones respectfully. I like to say, don't just the filter thing made me laugh earlier today, because that's the example of that cross-pollination done wrong, in my opinion. But it does show you vertical video. It's not going anywhere. So it's not new, but you better be ready for that vertical short video. And if your company's not making it, you're behind.
I also want to add to that real quick. You talked about how YouTube really wants to push the YouTube or the shorts because it's new. They're trying to copy. I think just in general, staying on top of whatever the latest thing is. So right now, TikTok is doing a beta of TikTok Shop, where you can link products in your videos. And I just got into that beta, I think as a result of my trip last week. And they actually sent me a notification saying that they would push my content heavily if I was including links to videos, because people can now shop through my profile. And we've talked about TikTok has never wanted you to leave the platform. None of the platforms want you to leave and go somewhere else. So for me to sell products, people have to go to my Shopify site. And so that's always been a tough one because I can't say link in bio. I can't type that out and to send people to my website. But now it's integrated with my TikTok account. And so people can purchase in app. And TikTok has said that they are going to be majorly pushing my content out even more if I'm using that new feature. And so like, of course, I'm going to use that new feature. I'm going to try to take full advantage of it. I had my first purchase from that last night from a TikTok employee. So I'm really interested to see how that unfolds, but that's really works for any platform. Whatever the newest thing is, whatever other people are trying to copy, jump on that because you can ride that initial wave of interest, especially as the new platforms. I know when Instagram released Reels, I think, Katy, was I messaging you that like I had a video get 15,000 views in like an hour and I was like, this is crazy. And then I realized it was just my very first one. They're going to push it because then that brings you in. It wants you to do more. It wants you to post more. We didn't see that again, but it did get me excited about it at first. So ride the wave.
Yeah, I think you ride the wave with that purpose. It will work. I mean, quality does matter, but you got to test out those new features. I think I had my greatest challenge with Twitter just because there's features I want on Twitter, but I won't pay for them, quite frankly. But with other platforms, I don't have to. So I find myself experimenting across the board and just seeing, does this work? How does this go? Does this video work better here or here? And part of that is also the audience. So we go back to that audience and that question of why are we doing this and who is this for? And so if you're always driving content with that idea of why are we doing this and does this line up with our mission and our audience, then you can test those waters in a meaningful way. And that's the key piece to me, is the purpose continues to exist. It's just a new methodology.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to be considered as our audience is getting more involved in content management and content marketing. So short form video, all of you mentioned the importance of video. Also thinking about what we talked about AI, we talked about use of Chat GPT, we talked about riding the wave. I like that new hashtag. Thanks, Katy. Riding the wave as platforms are introducing new tools and testing those out and getting a little bit of an extra push from that. Sophia put a great question in the chat about social media tools or strategies that would help monitor content engagement, because we're talking about the importance of getting that engagement. And even things like, as Callie mentioned, being able to link directly from her video and make those purchases in app. So when we think about content engagement, what can be done effectively to help monitor that engagement and better connect with your audience? And Katy, I know this is an area you have some expertise.
Yeah, and I did drop a response back in chat, but I'll kind of elaborate. So certainly using social listening as a way, and this is the reason I asked Chris earlier about his social listening, is a way to really understand what the data is telling you. But the data is only one piece of that story, right? So you really want to understand what content is resonating. Why is that resonating? Social listening can help you with that. You can use tools like Hootsuite or, some of the social media management platforms to really get a sense of, okay, what does my audience care about? It's also super important, I think, to benchmark analytics, understanding, where you are with the engagement. You're not going to be able to define what success is or what an engaged post is going to look like for your brand without understanding where you are. If you have 15 folks commenting on something, that could be really stellar engagement if you've only had 2 or 3 before. So really understanding where you want to go with that engagement, and then just more really importantly, listening to your audience and giving them space on platform to answer questions too. I think that's really important. So.
And when you do that listening, I think the important thing is, and this is the reason why Katy says data is great, but it doesn't always tell the whole story. I can see that December numbers, for example, at an organization are always down. And I can say, okay, they're down because we know our audience in particular is away at this time and they're not going to care about our university or our organization that at that time.
Mhm.
But it also could be in December. I've worked where our numbers jumped up because we had a particular activation that took place in December. So December, we was at a huge jump at the start of the month and then kind of went into a lull. But that jump was so big, December was always good. Now, if that activation was to go away, some might say, well, why are our numbers down? And my response would be, and I would make note of this in the benchmark, well, our numbers aren't really down. We just didn't do this activation. So our numbers are just normalized based on not doing X activation that we would have normally done this year. And we chose not to do it. And that tells a story. So you have to make sure you footnote those things because otherwise, when you're reporting this data back up and saying, hey, here's our numbers, and they see it's down 50% or 60%, you can say, this is the reason this is down. That answers the question. And C-suite, I just meant the thing I always tell people, I don't care if it's professors, partners, if we're talking leadership, it doesn't matter at what organization, they look at stuff really quick. So you have to tell the story quickly. And if you don't, there's probably going to be questions regardless. So be ready for that answer. But that's why the data is so critical when we're looking at that.
And I read the other day that like 47% of B2B marketers don't measure ROI for their content marketing, which terrifies me as a marketer, because I find it really confusing because we have so much data at our fingertips, right? And yet we're just content churning without analysis. And so we're not really learning about our audience at all. We're not really learning about what they care about. We're not learning about where they're going to engage because we're not looking at the data. We're just
that says a lot about organizations, though.
Right?
That shows just how mature organizations are.
Yeah.
I know, Callie, you're at an organization that cares a lot about this. You're looking at data. You're caring about your community. So maybe it's a little bit different for you. But I've been at enough of these organizations where I had to teach them that data is important, and they had no benchmarking. So it is, I think, more common, unfortunately, than not, that a lot of these organizations are very behind.
Yeah.
I also want to add in, like, I know we're talking about like engagement and just seeing the data behind it, but I think it's also important to talk about the sentiment behind it. So I literally just pulled a board report for the college that I run social media for yesterday. And so I had to write out an explanation of why our numbers were so high in February or in the beginning of March. And they're like, oh, wow, it was because of this event. And I was like, actually, it's because we lost one of our community members. And there was a lot of comments and engagement on that. And it was because our community was rallying around this great loss. And so, yeah, the numbers look really high. This looks great. Looks like we did a great job as the social media team. But the reality is we posted once in 2 weeks, or maybe twice in 2 weeks, because we were sharing the loss and then the service. And so I couldn't turn in a report the following week, or I told them I wouldn't, because 1 week it would be showing high numbers because of all the engagement we got on this extremely sad post. And then the 2 weeks later, it would be referencing in comparison to that week. And so I was like, this is one of those moments where you need to trust me that we're looking at the data, but we're looking at the sentiment behind it. And right now it's sad, and it's we're mourning the loss of this community member, but in the future, those spikes may be positive because maybe it's students moving to campus. And so giving that part of perspective to go with the data is always important as well.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the original question. No, there are a lot of tools out there. One of the biggest challenges now with tools, just so you know, is the fact that the data pipeline is getting more expensive. Twitter is more expensive now. LinkedIn has always been expensive. So the data pipeline is extremely expensive. Twitter in particular, you could still go into kind of the search itself and use the advanced searching, actually find a lot of good stuff. One of the tools that's free that I recommend that you do keep an eye about, which is just simply, you can set up Google alerts around key things to at least know if your name or your organization comes up. I have one set up on my name personally, just in case I'm ever, and I don't expect it ever, it doesn't happen, but it's a great way to know if something negative for some reason was said, or if something positive was said. And it's a great way to protect your own digital identity, just to be aware of it. I know now that there's like some musician or artist who has my same name from setting this up years ago. But that's the kind of stuff I would say. The free is becoming less and less, and the data is costing more. So as for the free tools, I'll try to come see what I have in the free tool list these days, but man, that list has gotten small in terms of ones that are high quality. You kind of got to do a lot of legwork on your own with native tools within their platforms. And it's unfortunate, but it is also the reality, it seems like.
I want to say too, Chris, it's so hard because just speaking towards data analysis, you have disparate data, right? So like I was looking at Loomly data this week, and I was trying to determine click-through from like LinkedIn, and I was getting, you know, different data points from LinkedIn, different data points from Loomly, and I'm like, okay, where do I report on at this point? You know, how do I say if this was successful or not? So I think training yourself to become a data analyst a little bit as a marketer is really helpful. Being able to understand what data matters to your executives, to your C-suite, to the people that you're reporting to, and really, you know, making sure that you're hitting it home with the data and not relying on it just to, as Callie said, to tell one side of that story. So.
Oh, this is great. So we know that story is critical to content marketing. We know that we have to tell not just stories about the organization or individuals within the organization to really drive engagement, but then we have to tell the story of the data too, as Katy reminded us, and Chris also suggested. That's fantastic.
And Dorene, the one thing I would just make sure that I say, because I think it's really important from an organizational perspective, is very often from an organization, we want to encourage people to share, you know, stuff about our organization. But the largest problem I have is people thinking, oh, let me just talk about the company. I actually want them to talk about themselves, which sounds really weird. But it's important to humanize themselves, because if someone just talks about a company all day, the reality is, as much as we say companies are family, I know it's a nice sentiment. The reality is companies aren't your family. And ultimately a company at a given moment really could have to go through layoffs like we have seen. And the human side, who you are, is so important to tell. And that's for you. That's important for the company, but it's also important for you to tell that story. So whatever tactics you're using, when Callie talks about the stuff, and you look at what Callie's doing on LinkedIn in particular about what she's doing, and she tells the story of how she started her business, those stories connect, but they also give value for the place that she works. And so it's two-sided. Tell the story of a company, share when you're excited about the company, but make sure you tell your own story too. The company appreciates it generally, but when it comes down to it, your own story is very important. And I always encourage people at the companies I'm at to tell their own story as well, because it only makes us all look better in the long run. And it humanizes a logo, which a brand itself can't do.
And you know, the reality is, Chris, your organizations are comprised of individuals. When we say, oh, the organization wants it this way, no, individuals in that organization are making that decision or guiding us in that direction, but we're still, you know, individuals that comprise that organization. So good reminder. Thank you. Well, we are
also teeing us up for another panel.
Getting us ready. Yeah, and we will need another panel, because we could talk all evening about this, right? Or probably even longer than that, but we're coming to the end. So what I'd love to do as we get ready to close out this session today is to ask each of you for a takeaway for our audience. What advice do you have for those seeking or currently engaged with content marketing? What's one critical piece of advice, something that they should remember?
I have 3 words: value over noise. If you take anything away, make sure you're putting out value, good content versus just putting out stuff to make sure something fills the calendar.
Thank you so much,
really had
Callie.
that written down, Callie.
That's
Literally
fantastic.
word for word.
The-
We spent too much time together.
Minds think alike.
I'll take your 3 words, and I guess I'll do 2. I'll say 2 words that have always kind of resonated for me, which is people first. If you put people first in the entire process, from storytelling to creating content to selling a quality product, it doesn't matter. If you put people first, you're ultimately going to create real, genuine content that means something to people. So if you put people first and you do that with purpose, you're going to be on a winning track. And for me, that's the words I live by, which is it's simple and straightforward. But I mean, I haven't strayed from it. I'm not going to start now. So I'll just, people first is what I would say.
And I'll close us out with chase your passion, and chase passions in general. So you're going to be able to tell better stories if you can determine where that passion lies in your org, where that passion lies with you. Chris and Callie and I all have passion projects. I know RJ, you do as well. It's certainly important to find that passion and then write to it in whatever context you can and content that you can create from a marketing perspective.
This has been absolutely fantastic. We have learned so much about you, and was hoping that as we wrap up, to remind the audience that you've heard the passion from our three experts. You've also heard the expertise from our three experts. That's why they're here with us today. And a few things that really stand out to me are the fact that we have to be strategic and mindful and intentional about our content marketing. That we want to make sure we know how we define success. We want to think about what our purpose is. We want to understand our audience. We want to really assess the data. And then as we're wrapping up, remember, value over content, people first, and find your passion. So thank you so much, Katy, Callie, and Chris. This has been an amazing learning experience for all of us, and we're really grateful that you were able to join us today as part of our Momentum program. RJ, I'll turn it back over to you.